All right, let's dive in. We're about to watch some digital organisms fight for their lives in a really cool experiment. It all comes down to one big question. Does evolution really favor the selfish, or can teamwork actually come out on top? Let's find out. It's a huge puzzle in biology. I mean, think about it. If evolution is all about survival of the fittest, it feels like it should always favor the ones who are just looking out for number one, right? Any gene that makes you sacrifice for somebody else, well, it should get wiped out pretty quickly. But it doesn't. We see cooperation everywhere, from tiny ant colonies all the way up to our own bodies. So what gives? How did it evolve? Okay, so to figure this out, we're going to follow a kind of digital Hunger Games that was laid out in a really interesting physics dissertation. First, we'll unpack the puzzle of teamwork itself. Then, we'll step into the arena to watch two teams go head-to-head. We'll see what happens in a simple world, then we'll raise the stakes, see how teamwork finally gets its win, and then, tie it all back to the real world. All right, first up, the core problem. Scientists call this the paradox of altruism. The logic here is, well, it's brutally simple. Just imagine you've got two creatures. One is totally selfish. It keeps every single piece of food it finds. The other one, it's a helper. It shares its food. So who's more likely to survive and have more babies? Yeah, the selfish one, right? Over a few generations, that helper gene should just disappear. And yet, nature is absolutely full of the most extreme version of this, division of labor. I mean, think about it. Worker bees, they don't even reproduce. They spend their whole lives working for the queen. And our own bodies, your liver cells and your brain cells do completely different jobs, all for the good of the whole system. This is the big mystery we're trying to solve. So, to really put this to the test, researchers didn't just sit back and watch nature. No, they built their very own digital arena. It's basically a world where they can set the rules and just let evolution run wild. So, the rules of the game are pretty straightforward. You've got these digital creatures, let's call them agents, and they need resources to make copies of themselves. Simple enough. Each agent has two main traits that can evolve. A foraging trait, how good they are at finding stuff, and a social trait, which is all about how they interact. And then two teams get dropped into this world to compete. So let's meet our competitors. On one side, we have Team Selfish. Pretty self-explanatory. These agents can find resources, but they keep everything for themselves. Then on the other side, we have Team Sharer. They can also forage, but they've got an extra trick up their sleeve. They can actually share what they find with their teammates. So the big question is that ability to share actually going to give them an edge? All right, let the games begin. For round one, the world is super simple. There's only one kind of resource out there, and everybody needs it to reproduce. That's it. So place your bets now. What do you think is going to happen? Does Team Sharer's cooperative spirit give them the win, or does Team Selfish's every agent for themselves strategy just work better? And the result? Well, it's a draw. But why it's a draw is the really fascinating part. It turns out, in this simple world, sharing was totally useless. In fact, over thousands of generations, Team Sharer basically evolved to stop sharing. That social trait just faded away, and they became just as selfish as their competitors. And the final population numbers really drive this home. After all that time, there was no clear winner. So, in a world of simple scarcity, teamwork just failed its first test. Okay, so the huge takeaway from round one is this. Cooperation is fragile. It's not some magic bullet. You can't just give a group the ability to be helpful and expect them to win. The environment itself has to create a situation where teamwork actually pays off. So for round two, the researchers decided to make the world a little more complex. They raised the stakes, adding a brand new variable to the mix. Okay, so now, instead of just one resource, there are two. The agents need to find one type of resource just to stay alive, and a completely different type of resource to actually have offspring. This simple little change splits survival from reproduction, and it creates a much tougher puzzle for our digital agents to solve. And you know what? In this more complex world, something incredible happened. Team Sharer didn't just survive this time, it found a secret weapon. And that secret weapon wasn't just about sharing. It was specialization. See, now that they were faced with two different problems, surviving and reproducing, Team Sharer figured out it was way more efficient to just divide and conquer. It was amazing. Team Sharer just spontaneously split into two different groups. One group became these elite foragers. They evolved low social traits so they could just focus 100% on gathering both types of resources. The other group, they became specialist sharers, kind of like distributors. They evolved super high social traits, but pretty low foraging skills. Their whole job was to efficiently pass the collected resources to the agents who needed them to reproduce. It was a perfect system. I mean, this is a textbook example of division of labor. Nobody programmed them to do this. The simple pressures of trying to survive and reproduce in a more complicated world were enough for this super sophisticated strategy to evolve all on its own. It's wild. And we can actually measure this, which is so cool. The researchers used a metric that's basically a teamwork score. A low score means it's chaos. Everyone's doing their own thing. But a high score, that means structure, coordination. And for Team Sharer, this score went through the roof. It was the hard data that proved their new strategy was working like a charm. And the final result? A decisive victory. As you can see from this chart of the final populations, Team Sharer didn't just survive. It absolutely thrived. Their population grew way larger than Team Selfish, who just couldn't come up with a strategy this sophisticated. Division of labor was the winning ticket, hands down. So, what does a simulation about dueling pixel creatures really tell us about the real world? Why does any of this matter? So what's the bottom line here? Well, first, it shows that you don't need complicated rules to get complex, lifelike teamwork. It can just emerge from simple pressures. Second, the real power of cooperation often comes from specialization. Dividing up the work is what turns a regular group into a highly effective superorganism. And finally, this model gives us a really powerful clue about how all complex life, from the very first multi-celled creatures all the way to our own societies, might have gotten its start. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, if a system as complex as division of labor can pop up from such simple beginnings, what other complex behaviors, things like communication or maybe even consciousness, could also arise from that same relentless pressure to just survive and reproduce? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining me for this one.